So I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of relationships in the fact that you can make the wrong decision in a partner based on their own perspective on health. Okay. So one avenue might be their choices for living situation. This is one that's highly underestimated. So living situation might be um, you're dating in college and a guy can only afford so much, so he gets a moldy place. You go over to his place inadvertently, not knowing about mold, and then you are exposed to the mycotoxins, and there's many of them. Each can have different effects, but generally all bad. And so this can be a big defining aspect to one's health. Though when someone's in their early 20s, a lot of the time they may not notice anything at all when they're being frequently bombarded by mycotoxins. So it's really important to choose your partner wisely when it comes to living environment, just on its own. Another aspect might be to choose the right partner in terms of their microbiome, right? So our every part of our body has its, well, I think there's roughly seven, maybe even more. I don't think that microbiology has progressed fast enough or far enough. And specifically, the oral microbiome will have all kinds of colonies of microbes that exist within it. And so within a relationship, you're likely to kiss someone, right? You're about to breathe that person's air. So their microbiome is largely being shared with yours. And there's plenty of research to back this up. People largely, in some ways, become the other person on a microbial level. This is really, really important to understand because while the research behind microbiology is very infantile today, it's catching up. It's going to reveal more and more and more to us how important our environment is, especially those we surround ourselves with. So, another thing that can indirectly affect the microbiome, and specifically someone's oral microbiome, might be uh, their diet, right? So, what you eat is essentially what they eat, and those microbes largely populate around the foods. And so, particularly if you were to eat too much sugar, you might produce an oral microbiome full of yeast microbes. These are eukaryotic, so this means that you have a cell wall and a nucleus. It typically means, and this is my assumption, I think they're smarter because they have a nucleus. I also think they're more opportunistic because they have a nucleus. And so therefore, they may be seeking more than just helping us out. The prokaryotic organisms such as bacteria and archaea, I might be pronouncing it wrong. These guys, it's hard to prove their opportunism, their push for satisfying their own needs. But when we look at yeast, mold, and various parasites like helminths and protozoa, it's pretty easy to understand what they're doing in our body. A lot of people argue what is actually going on. Some people think they're just there to consume decaying tissue. Largely, this isn't true because they do consume decaying tissue, but they do also consume healthy tissue. They're just opportunistic. They do what they can do. Our body keeps them in check. And so these microbes, when they're capable of such, and when we destabilize our immune system, say we eat too much sugar in a day, a bunch of waffles, pancakes, spaghetti. This was my favorite thing when I was a kid. And what these foods do will cultivate an environment that's not only full of carbohydrates that break down into sugar, it'll very much make it beneficial for the yeast to thrive because the yeast and mold and parasites, but first yeast because they very much appreciate sugar, and specifically candida. When they consume sugar, they're able to grow exponentially. And if they were to have access to a good estrogen source, they can further alter themselves and they can become more virulent. And so they can pass on into the bloodstream, depending on the weakness of the host intestinal lining. So you have this gastrointestinal tract. Here it starts at the small intestine and it goes into the colon, well, the large intestine. And so these microbes can take advantage of because we have this mucosa that kind of lines the gastrointestinal tract, and it can become compromised. And candidas become very good at this through through my own understanding of the research that exists. And when it gains access to this and it starts to contribute to the permeability of the gut lining and its overall strength or weakness, it can lead to these microbes burrowing through what are called the tight cap junctions into the bloodstream. And so when this happens, it becomes more of a systemic problem. There's not much one can do in terms of taking oral detoxification herbs or extracts to try to get rid of the fungus, because in the bloodstream you can only really do so much. Yes, your body will absorb things and place them into the bloodstream. Yes, you can consume things that enhance your immune system, like your T and B cells, which will help go after things that are in the bloodstream. But what we're dealing with is something that can mimic tissue. Yeast organisms are very much capable of this. And so I imagine a good amount of the autoimmune disease that we experience today is when the immune system starts attacking our own tissue. It potentially can be attacking the fungus because it's mimicking our tissue. I just think it's important for people to keep this in perspective, because if they don't, it can easily get to a place where it's conquering tissue areas of our body that could be a big deal. And so when you're entering into a relationship, I'm not saying that you're just going to get candida and it's going to grow all over your body, but you can definitely develop a different microbiome of your oral microbiome. And largely, you're going to probably end up eating a lot of what your partner eats. And that's what's really going to change your microbiome and the gastrointestinal tract. So that's where the majority of the microbes are. And so very important to keep that in mind. You want to align yourself with someone who has the correct truth in mind as far as what might be the most optimal microbiome cultivation. I'm not going to make any absolute statements, but I believe that nature is the answer. So when we look at the nutritional epidemiology that exists today, it all points toward nature, toward survival. All of those factors are pretty much all that we need to be healthy. And so we want to look to the environment, right? So you got sunlight, good air, no non-native electromagnetic frequencies. One would have, lifestyle-wise, exercise quite a bit to survive. Their bare feet would be in the soil, the ground, very often. And they would have gotten a lot of sunlight, pretty decent amount. It's very likely that we started on the coast and we ate more fish. We would have been more of a hunter, or more hunters, because agriculture wouldn't have been the original blueprint. Agriculture is something that's developed, or it's given to us. And we can make all kinds of esoteric arguments about something being given to us from the very beginning of mankind. But if you believe in mankind having been around for over 300,000 years, then it's very likely we're hunters. And that seems to be proven. In that sense, our anatomy would not have changed very much. And it looks as if that's true now, because when you look at the human cecum, this is after the small intestine ends. It's where the plant matter is supposed to ferment when we consume it. It's not very big. So we don't get a lot of nutrition from the plants that we eat because of the size of our cecum. And so it's better to assume through our anatomy that we're more opportunistic hunters, and that because we have hands, and a very great intelligence, we can develop tools to help us break down the foods. One can argue if raw or cooked is better. Studies do say that cooked technically digests better because it's pre-digested, but then they're carcinogens. So on the raw side, I'll say from my experience, even with meat, because sushi is really great, it does produce so many more health benefits. But that's a controversial topic, and I'm not suggesting people go and do raw. To bring it all back, it's important that the person that you're with eats a diet that is healthy and they live in a space that is healthy and they are focused on health, because this will define your entire life if you decide to stay with them. Even just a year with this person can seriously define your health. So, something to keep in mind. Also subscribe, like the post or like the video. Sorry, subscribe, like, and share.